Welcome back to another episode of In Case You Missed It with Khristina Williams. Today we're joined by Basketball Hall of Famer and Connecticut Sun president Jennifer Rizzotti to talk all things Connecticut Sun this season as the WNBA approaches its 30th season. We'll also get into the transition to Houston in 2027 and also discuss how the Sun will be navigating this at a pivotal moment in WNBA history. Welcome to In Case You Missed It.
Hi, thanks. I don't know that anybody missed this actual news, but we can definitely talk about it.
No, absolutely. And I just want to dive right into it because obviously the reports about this process had been unfolding for a while. And when news like a franchise sale becomes official, what are the first responsibilities that fall on your desk as the president of the Connecticut Sun?
I think first and foremost is making sure we have our communications ready to all of our stakeholders. I think it's hard when something's been speculated about for a long time, people not understanding that we can't actually say anything until that a news is officially announced by, the ownership groups. And so that happened, Monday morning, and we were prepared to communicate the news to all of the stakeholders, even though they probably had already heard it, and just make sure that we were transparent, showing some empathy, making it very clear that we were going to be playing our last season here in Connecticut for anybody who wasn't sure about that, and just being open so that if people had questions, they knew where to direct them.
In a region like New England, where sports is such a big part of the culture and identity, what does it mean for this community that they're gonna lose this team next season?
Yeah, it's been a tough, couple days for sure in terms of what we've seen in reactions and what people have said when they've called in. Obviously a lot of disappointment. This team has been here for 23 years. We have built a very passionate and loyal fan base. We have expanded our footprint into the Boston market. We plan on playing 2 games in the Hartford market this year, and that the reason for that was to be able to make the game more accessible to all of New England. So I think just a little bit of shock and disappointment around the void that is going to be here when the team leaves after 2026, and just being able to see if we can turn that narrative into something that we want to celebrate, the legacy of the Connecticut Sun, what it's accomplished both on and off the floor, and being able to celebrate that throughout the year with our fans that have made this a cornerstone franchise in the WNBA.
And you just mentioned that, this season will be a season of celebration for the franchise's last season in Connecticut. How will you define what this organization needs to give to Connecticut before this chapter closes?
Well, we need to make sure we show our gratitude, right? And I want our fans to know that this season matters, and I want them to know how much we appreciate everything that they have poured in. It's tough. I mean, the discourse around the news is so mixed. There's obviously a lot of people who are excited in the Houston area to be having a franchise back, but those are probably the same fans that also know what it feels like to have a franchise fold in their market. And so they should have some empathy towards the New England fans in terms of what they're dealing with right now. And so, I think for us, we know that what this franchise has meant. We know that there is so much that we want to highlight and celebrate when it comes to the alums of this and legends of this organization, to the people that have gone before me to lift this franchise up, to the fans that have been day one fans. And we want to make sure that although they may be disappointed now, that they get to have an opportunity to be here with us in those last days. We do get to celebrate that. We do get to have one more season, and not everybody has that opportunity. And so we're just, doing our diligence and trying to make sure people understand this is a hard moment for a lot of people. I have people in my front office that are devastated, right? Like, this is their first job and this is their only job in the WNBA. And so just some compassion around what a lot of people are feeling in this region, I think, is appreciated at this time, but also knowing that we are turning the page as an organization, and we are making sure that we have an optimistic and positive view about what we can accomplish over the next 6 months before the team leaves.
And credits to the Mohegan Tribe, because they hold such a historic place when you think about the WNBA and the journey to the 30 seasons as independent owners. What do you think that this moment says about how the business of the WNBA is evolving? Because it looks like it's leaning towards more NBA affiliated ownership. What does that say about how the game is growing and evolving?
I don't think I want it to get lost what the Mohegan Tribe has meant to the WNBA and all of this. As blame is being placed all around, I want people to remember that 23 years ago, when franchises were folding and it wasn't popular to own a WNBA team, this was an ownership group that stepped up. They bought the Orlando Miracle, moved it to a basketball mecca, and poured into it in terms of resources and support over decades. They were at the forefront of what it meant to be an individual owner, the very first individual owned franchise, the very first Native American owned professional sports team in this country. They were at the forefront of facilities at the time. And we had our own space that we could practice when a lot of teams didn't have that. And they were at the forefront of building an arena that was the right size for the WNBA. I think what this moment is saying to a lot of people is that yes, maybe the WNBA has outgrown this market. It doesn't mean that we can't support a WNBA team. Both things can be equal, right? Or happen at the same time. We can say that the WNBA is at a place where the resources, the infrastructure, and the facility needs that are necessary in some cases are probably a little bit easier with NBA owned franchises. And that's okay. There's no fault to the tribe and what they've accomplished and what they've poured into this, and also making the decision that what was best for this team and what was best for the league was to sell the team at this moment. And we can be sad about that, but we can also be excited that Houston is getting a great organization. This team is moving to a great market that is going to really support this team at a high level. I know that from personal experience because I played there for 2 summers. And the Rockets organization is going to support this team at a level that all these players have come to expect. And that's a good thing.
I think the public, a lot of fans are confused about what happens when there's an
Yeah.
expansion versus when a team relocates. And as you mentioned, that this organization is no stranger to relocation. You mentioned your Orlando
Hmm.
Miracle a little bit ago. When a franchise relocates, what are the real tangible ways you make sure the history, the players, the moments, the
Yeah.
impact are preserved and embedded into the history of the league? That well, this is something that's not going to be
Yeah.
forgotten.
Well, obviously no one's forgotten the Houston Comets, right? I mean, obviously at the level that franchise won, but also nobody's forgotten the Rockers or the Shock and some of these other cities that are now also bringing WNBA franchises back. And I think it just speaks to like how passionate WNBA fans are in general in those cities. There is no way that Connecticut fans will ever let people forget about the Connecticut Sun. The level of sustained excellence over 23 years is close to unparalleled. I know we never hung a championship banner, but this franchise has been to multiple, WNBA finals. We've had MVPs, we've had Olympians, we've had coaches that have gone on to win championships. We will do what we can over this season to make sure that that is honored and celebrated and that we are cementing our legacy here in this region. But I know that our fans will carry that on forever, regardless of where this team was going to move. This is not a franchise that will be easily forgotten.
With the return of the Houston Comets name in 2027, there's also a personal
Mhm.
connection for you. You were actually drafted
Mhm.
and you played for the franchise early in your career. What stands out when you think about that time and the excitement around, as you said, basketball going back to
Yeah, I
Houston?
mean, my memories of Houston obviously are very fond because I was a part of 2 WNBA championships and we sold out every home game, right? And a lot of times when we traveled, we sold out a lot of away arenas. I played at a time that was like the height of the early days in the WNBA. And I think people forget that the momentum was really high for a while before it started to kind of decline and plateau. But knowing that I was a part of a franchise that was competing at a high level, that had a fan base that was rabid, right, and has a true, you know, legacy in their own right. I think for a player, that's where like I understand the excitement of bringing a franchise back there, especially as a former player in the league. As I've said throughout the week, I can in one hand be a little bit sad for our fans here in Connecticut and myself as a Connecticut native, but I can also be excited and understand how the fans in Houston feel because I was there and I felt what it meant to be a part of a franchise that was so storied. So I think, there's a lot of mixed emotions for a lot of us, but for me personally, I think I can be excited for our players knowing that they're again entering a market that's going to be really ready to, welcome them with open arms and embrace the fact that they're excited that they're bringing the WNBA back there.
And now we see all of that momentum and excitement coming back to the game. We just saw that the league ratified a new
Yes.
CBA deal, and there's a huge TV deal coming this
Mhm.
season as well. Do you see any similarities between the time when you played and the hype that we're seeing now?
A little bit, right? I think, last year we broke attendance records that were set, very early in the WNBA history because that was when the WNBA was the most popular before the last few years. I know it's a very different time and place. I think that's like really exciting as a former player to think about this new CBA and what it means in terms of valuing not just the players in terms of monetary salaries, but also in terms of the elevated benefits, right? And minimum standards in the league that they've come to expect. I also feel honored that I'm, as a team president, understand like that this CBA also was monumental for, what Kathy Engelbert has said all along, having a long-term sustainable model to make sure that we're around for a long time and that team ownerships can continue to be incentivized to invest. And so it's pretty fun to see as a player from a player side and a business side that we were able to accomplish so much in the CBA and that the future of the WNBA is so bright and that as we continue to see more investment coming into this league that we're only going to go up from here and that was the whole purpose of making sure that this agreement really suited every party from player to ownership side.
Yeah, and you were in the room for some of those
Yeah.
conversations. I
Yeah.
saw the photos. What was the energy like, being part of those negotiations and essentially being a part of
Yeah, it
history?
was a pretty indescribable feeling. I think Necca's, said it a couple times, like how proud she feels to be there in that moment. Kathy has said this to be part of a transformational deal. And I think we all truly felt that in the room, when the time came that we were making history, not just for current players, but for former players, for future owners in this league. Just exciting time to be a part of it and to know that I was that close to it and was able to witness it was really for me, transformational, right? Because you don't really understand the business as much when you're just as a player, and to see these players in the room with the passion they had, fighting for what they believed in, and finding that balance as a group and coming to a compromise that made sense for everybody. It was really, truly an unbelievable experience.
We're on the cusp of two expansion drafts and a WNBA free agency that's sort of unprecedented with over 100 players being free agents. As you think about the Connecticut Sun's 2026 season, how are you approaching this when you think about players who are also thinking about
Yes.
stability and
Yeah,
what's
yeah.
ahead?
Well, I think regardless of what the outcome was with our team news, we have a responsibility, myself and Morgan Tuck, to be thinking about roster construction regardless of where the team landed, right? Whether it stayed in Connecticut or it moved out of the region. And so I know Morgan's been working hard to really, create a model that will allow us to be successful here in our last season in Connecticut, but also for years to come. And I think that's the goal of any GM, right, in the league. There are some that maybe feel like they're at a point where they need to be competing for a championship, that are others that are just in a complete rebuild. I feel like we're somewhere in the middle, right, where we have this opportunity to build off of foundation that we built last year, continue to invite players through free agency to be a part of what we're building. Because at the end of the day, I do feel like franchises are about the people, not always about location. And I want, players to know that we have great people here. We're building something special. Morgan has built a great foundation of coaches and players to move us into the future and to build that stability. And I think with the new CBA, there's opportunity to give players the stability that they're looking for at least financially, and have them be excited that they get to be a part of maybe one chapter that's closing here, but also an exciting new chapter that's opening for them in Houston. And not, no other GM can say that. And I think we do have a unique situation here. I'm excited to see what unfolds. It's going to be like free agency speed dating for all these GMs over the next couple weeks. But I think it's so exciting to know that people are really dialed in to what's going on with the WNBA, and they're so excited that the CBA was accomplished, that we're starting on time, and they get to see their favorite players play throughout the summer.
Only a couple more
Mhm.
before I let you get out of here, but staying on free agency and off season, I think one of the interesting things that I've been able to notice in terms of
Mhm.
trends is we're seeing more
Mhm.
media and
Mhm.
analytics voices move into front offices this off season. Some of
Yes.
my peers,
Yeah.
Kevin Pilton, Ben
Yeah.
Pickman, your own Ashley Battle with the
Yeah.
Portland Fire now. What does that signal to you as a
Mhm.
team president that like more teams are investing into the
Yes.
analytics sides and also tapping into some of my
Yes.
media peers to be in those front office
Absolutely.
positions?
Well, I mean, it's a kudos to you all, right, for the knowledge that you have around our team and the passion that you put into covering it the right way. So you guys are experts in the field of WNBA, news and free agency yourselves. So kudos to all of you for that. I think, what you asked earlier about, some of the movement towards NBA owned franchises, and I think that the shared resources opportunity around analytics is something that potentially has maybe put some of these NBA franchises ahead of their peers, because it is something that has been so important on the NBA side. And as we add teams into the league and we add more and more players, the draft is going to become a lot more important. The decisions that we make around free agency is going to become a lot more important. So, regardless of whether you may have as a GM or a coach a gut feeling about who you think might be good for your program, it's always nice when you can back it up with actual statistics and analytics. And so, it's great to see all of these front offices starting to expand beyond just coaches and player development and adding these positions to their staff. And I think what people are forgetting is that through expansion, we are going to be adding dozens of new players, dozens of new coaches, and dozens of new front office employees to the WNBA. And so the opportunity for people in women's basketball is expanding at a really exciting rate. And again, all of us are excited that now we're at a place where we can start to pour in resources at a level where we deserve, that our players deserve, because the elevating the player experience is the goal of everybody. And knowing who you're signing and knowing who you're bringing into the franchise that can maybe become, somebody who plays for you for 10 to 12 years is in a healthy environment, is something that's going to be really, really important as teams are trying to vie for that championship opportunity.
As we look ahead to the 30th WNBA
Yeah.
season, what's your message for Connecticut Sun fans?
Yeah, I think the message is that, we are going to make sure that they feel heard and seen and appreciated through this year. They've been a big part of the WNBA for 23 out of the 30 years of its existence. We'll make sure that that's not forgotten. We will cement our legacy in WNBA history through this season. We're excited to welcome them into our arena, celebrate with them. I think they've always made decisions that were around supporting the players we've had on the court. So regardless of all the emotions swirling, I know that they're going to show up and support the players because they've done that for 23 years.
Lastly, I
Okay.
can't let you get out of here without talking about
Oh
the women's
yeah,
Final
let's
Four
go.
coming this weekend. You've been a part of women
Mhm.
winning environments at UConn, obviously. What do the best programs consistently
Yeah.
have that make them just grow at every level? And give me your championship prediction, although I think I already know this.
Yeah, that's a hard one. I will say, of course, I'm rooting for the Huskies this weekend, but I honestly think all four teams have an opportunity to win a championship. And I think the common denominator is they have excellent coaches. I've had a chance to witness each of them. Obviously, Gino, but Dawn, Vic, and Corey through USA Basketball, they know what they're doing. And when you look at their programs, they have had players that have invested in their programs for 4 years. And that matters. Even though they've all welcomed transfers into their program, when you look at who their best players are, right? AZ Fudd and Raven Johnson and Lauren Betts, right? And Rory Harmon. These are players that showed up on those campuses and committed to those teams for 4 and 5 years. And it really matters that those coaches have built programs that have allowed players not just to want to stay and fight for those coaches, but also welcome, great transfers into the program that have made a difference. And so when you can sustain a roster for years to come and you can build some continuity, you have a chance to be championship level. And all four of those programs have done that. And that's a testament to all four of those coaches.
Well, Jen, I want to thank you so much for joining us this week on In Case You Missed It. Wishing you
Thank
all
you.
the best of luck
Thanks
out
so
there in
much.
Connecticut
Appreciate
this
it. And we'll look
season.
forward to seeing you here in Connecticut this summer.